1, 2, 2. This is so fucking stupid. Right, there's your audio level now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hey, I'm sorry that I hit your elbow. Good? Okay. One more check for the stream. Audio for the stream. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hey, rutabaga, Studebaker.
Muddy water, I'm getting out while there's still time. Muddy water, I'm getting out while there's still time. You do what you do, I will stand until I die. I think it sounds good for me. Cool. Do you need anything else? You feeling good? Cool. Sweet. Thank you so much. Thanks. They say the best days are ahead. But why do we have to wait till we're withered, almost dead? I saw your face today, and your eyes swept me away. What a lover called on broken shade. Shadow memories that we felt parted ways. Don't you ever, ever, ever hear what I say. You and me will be together someday. No one wants it more than you. So let yourself embrace what's good and new. The void from letting go will be filled with so much more. Just think what this might be. Entertainment possibility. Don't you ever, ever, ever what I say. You and me will be together someday. I've been pulling back a bit. I can't walk away. You release me till you release me. Thank you so much. Welcome to the Boulder International Film Festival. Super stoked to be opening for Cheryl Strayed. And also, happy International Women's Day, everyone. This is a pretty amazing way to spend it. So thanks for being here. I used to be more faithful, used to be more proud, used to think that I could leave this godforsaken town. Can't afford to stay here, can't afford to leave, can't afford to live a month on these goddamn feet. I'm so tired of running tired of chasing nothing when ain't nothing gonna come. I'm so tired of running I lost before I started, might as well be done. People around here work hard, trying to deceive. They used to trust a helping hand, now still they're naive. I'll never be a darling child, won't even be seen. Used to think I had a chance, that was just a dream. I'm so tired with the sun. I'm so tired, running down, tired of chasing nothing when ain't nothing gonna come. I'm so tired, running down. Off before I started, might as well be done. My name's Riley Ann. Thank you so much. I used to live in Boulder, Colorado, and it's a really, really beautiful place to live. And you're right next to the Flatirons, and I've met some of the best people in the world right here in Boulder, Colorado. I ended up moving to Fort Collins. It's a little bit more affordable as a working artist, working musician. So primarily, I play out with my blues rock band called the Catcalls. I'll get into some bluesy stuff in a bit. But I also have this history in like kind of old-time country music. So I decided I was doing a songwriting challenge. I don't know if you've heard of this funk band called the Burros, but I'm friends with one of the saxophone players. She did a songwriting challenge to write a song every day in the month of February, in the month of February, which is pretty intense. And I thought, I write a lot of sad songs, so I should write like a country waltz, and I'll put it in G major, and that'll make it happy. So this is my shot at writing a happy song. Won't you sing me a love song? Something real nice. Bars almost empty, I'm sure they won't mind. I just can't stand it, sleeping alone, waking up every night, sheets knotted up cold. Won't you sing me a love song? Something real sweet. Every song you've been singing reminds me of me. And these bottles can't tell the weight of my grief. World of me, these sad songs. Love without heartbreak, regret and wrong. So sing me something true. Sing me out of these blues. Won't you sing me a love song? Something I dream. 'Cause I've got to escape all the pain I feel. And I'm tired of these thoughts. Won't you sing me a love song? Something real nice. Bars almost empty, sure they won't mind. Thank you so much. I really want to thank the Boulder International Film Festival for having me, as well as Etown for this beautiful space. They get an incredible lineup of musicians year-round, so if you haven't done so, do yourself a favor and check out their calendar here. It's a real honor to be opening for Cheryl Strayed. She's a really incredible woman, a really incredible author, incredible feminist. And I think a lot of what she writes about is really about having courage with yourself of whatever journey that you're on. And in this point in time, we're on a really interesting journey. It's really important to pay attention and have courage and do things that are right. The song's about that. What will we call ourselves when the fire's fled? Will there be enough of us to bury all the dead? Will we cling to battle flags of a government? I don't know. I don't know. This is nothing, and I won't back down. This part of life is just a beat. This is nothing, and I won't back down. I'll keep and see. And with the flame torch, you're right at me. Words echo from the past, give us your love. And even possible, we could agree. I don't know. I don't know. This is nothing, and I won't back down. This part of body is a chance to be. This is nothing, and I won't back down. I'll feel when I see. They were the only way to keep us free. And behind the podium, said it on TV. And now we trust or so they say, it's how we lead. I don't know. I don't know. And I won't back down. This part of body is just a beat. This is nothing, and I won't back down. I'll be here. I feel through the air. Wait and see. name is Riley Ann. I often play with my blues rock band called the Catcalls. And if you're interested in more about that song, we have more information on our website. All the proceeds do benefit the Equal Justice Initiative, which is working to, it's a great nonprofit working to end racial injustice in this country. We have more information at our website, thecatcallsband.com. Also, we've got the social medias as well. All right, this last song you might recognize. The Colorado Sound has been giving us a lot of love on this one for the radio, so maybe you'll recognize it. Thank you so much. My name's Riley, and this is my last tune. Up next is Cheryl Strayed. Somebody told me to be good. Stop running around like they thought I should. Settle down in some neighborhood. I really don't think that they understand. I get high, get by, I get low. I get high, get by, alone. I get high, get by, I get low. I get high, get by, alone. Mama told me, little girl, you want to die right in this world. Do it yourself, cause everyone disappoint you when all is done. I get high, get by, I get low. I get high, get by, alone. I get high, get by, I get low. I get high, get by, alone. Everyone is out for themselves. Nobody else. When it's done just right. You gotta do it on your own. Mama and Daddy raised me good. Even though I'm misunderstood, won't say I'm sorry for who I am. If this is right now, I don't give a damn. I get high, get by, I get low. I get high, get by, alone. I get high, get by, I get low. I get high, get by, alone. Alone, alone, alone. Thank you so much. Up next is Cheryl Strayed. Have a great rest of your beautiful Sunday. Happy International Women's Day, everyone.
Hi, folks. I'm Kathy Beck, and I'm the director of the Boulder International Film Festival. So great to see you all here today. So excited to have you. A couple of quick notes I wanted to mention. We're selling those Yeti mugs outside. They're fabulous. They're $20. They're usually $35 online. They have a logo of Biff and the Adventure Film Pavilion on them. Please check them out. We also have Biff beer this year, Biff branded beer from Upslope. Go figure. I love it. So check that out. They're only $2. And then I wanted to thank our house at 29th Street for providing us with this furniture. They are wonderful. They let us use this kind of stuff every year, and they're fabulous. So I just wanted to give them a shout out. Also, that trailer, I think it's just fabulous. I know. Let's give an applause. Yeah. That trailer was put together by Z. Griffler with a lot of help from Sarah Leone and Isaac Sabat. So big kudos to them. I just love it. And, you know, it's International Women's Day today, so that's huge. And, yeah, woo! Love it. I first learned there was an International Women's Day in 1992. I was living in Moscow, and I'm walking the streets, and people are, you know, all these Russian men are giving the women flowers and chocolates. And I kept going, what's going on here? I don't understand what this is. And someone gave me a flower, and what is this? And I found out, you know, it's International Women's Day. And I said, is that a thing? I didn't know that. And, you know, chocolates and flowers, but something wasn't connecting for me. I'm like, why does that seem not quite right? And it wasn't until years later when I realized that, you know, it is a thing, but, you know, it hadn't been recognized that much, and it started to be recognized more, that it really wasn't about the chocolate and the flowers. So, you know, it's really about women's empowerment. And I'm so happy to be featuring some of the films we've had here at the Adventure Film Pavilion and also at BIF generally, because these are films about women, and it's whether they're solo kayaking the Ladakh River in India or they're fighting a big mining corporation to keep off their land in Peru. These are powerful women's stories, and I'm so excited to be featuring them here this year. But this is also, thank you. It's also why I'm so thrilled to feature Cheryl Strayed here today. Because, thank you, yes, woo! I love it. You know, Cheryl has been a hero of mine since I read Wild. And I ended up, you know, backpacking the Colorado Trail over 4 summers just a few years back. And I did it by myself primarily, and I ran into so many women hiking that trail by themselves. And it was sort of an unspoken thing when we'd run into each other. I just knew we've all read Wild, and it was understood, and we didn't have to talk about it, but we were all out there doing this. And it was so common on these 485 miles of that trip that it just wasn't a thing. And I just think that Cheryl was so instrumental in making that not a thing. And I really appreciate that. She has done more than just that. Obviously, she's done so many more things. She really embodies, you know, the spirit of International Women's Day, which is the empowerment of women. And she's got so many other projects that she's working on currently or has completed that do exactly that. And that is why we wanted to feature her here today. We were sorry that Timmy O'Neill was not able to do the interview. He unfortunately had a medical emergency in Patagonia, and he was down there filming with Jimmy Chin, wasn't able to make it here. So we really wish Timmy the best. Even despite of that medical emergency, he did make a call to a good friend who lives here in Boulder, Scott Jurek. And we were really lucky to have Scott Jurek step in for Timmy for this interview. Scott is an ultra marathoner and an author and a public speaker. And he lives right here in Boulder. He was one of the most dominant ultramarathoners in the world. And in 2015, he completed the speed record for the Appalachian Trail. He is a New York Times best-selling author of 2 different books. One is Eat and Run, and the other is North. And we're really pleased to have him here today. It's interesting to me because there is quite a juxtaposition between Scott and Cheryl, and it just strikes me because Scott did this, the speed record for the Appalachian Trail, which is amazing. And he probably trained, for how long for that, and completed it. And then Cheryl did the Pacific Crest Trail, and, she did not train. Let's just get it out there, okay? So it's quite a juxtaposition, and I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about that. So I'd like to welcome up Scott Jurek and Cheryl Strayed.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Okay, but Reese Witherspoon didn't play you in a movie, did she? It pays to not prepare, right? I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for saying yes to this. When I heard you were going to interview me, I was just absolutely thrilled.
Well, it's such an honor. And am I just coming?
Yeah, you can hear us.
All right. I wasn't
Hi,
quite
everyone.
Sure. I can hear you. I just want to make sure mine was working.
All the women turned out for International Women's Day.
Well, it's a real honor and pleasure. And why don't we just give Timmy? Timmy's known for these. Who knows Timmy O'Neill in town here or in the Front Range? He loves to give loud shouts, and if we could give a loud shout to Timmy O'Neill, it'll be blasted to Santiago, Chile, where he's in a hospital bed right now.
Aww.
So let's give Timmy a big round.
Woo!
Yeah! He's such a force here in the community, and we give him our best. He's not been doing so well, and we just hope he makes a speedy recovery.
Yeah.
So those of you loving it, I got to do this opportunity, but because of Timmy, who would be here. So life has those interesting pathways. And it was interesting that Kathy was saying that you didn't train, but I like to think that she did train because she grew up in northern Minnesota. And those of you...
Like Scott did too.
I grew up in northern Minnesota as well.
We grew up like an hour drive from each other.
Definitely.
Yes.
So she knows all about suffering in the heat, suffering mosquitoes, the cold weather. I feel like she grew up even more badass than me because she grew up... sometimes in a ramshackle type of tar paper shack, as she called it. I had definitely more of a roof over my head. But we know about those similarities, and I feel like, what do you think it is about your roots in terms of Minnesota, besides the mosquitoes and the cold? At least in running, there's this, I guess, this kind of urban legend that Minnesotans always made the best long-distance runners. And there's some great pedigree that's come out of Minnesota, but what do you think about your roots prepared you for doing something like the Pacific Crest Trail and tackling something like that?
I think it's a layer, I think you're absolutely right that my childhood deeply informed my ability to do what I did on the trail. And really, I think the ability to make the decision that I would hike that trail. And this is something I told, speaking of Reese, when we were shooting the movie, every day I was on the set, and I would say to her, because one of the things that happened in translation when Wilde goes from the book to the movie to the headline is often, she was completely unprepared. She was using heroin, and she was this reckless drunkard, and then she's hiking. And it was like, well, it's a little more complicated than that, a little more nuanced. If you pay attention in the book, what I'm saying is I begin the book really telling first the story of my extremely strong and resilient and loving mother. So I think that, first of all, just having somebody who loved me and who nurtured me to believe in myself and who nurtured me to believe that I could heal myself if ever I should need to. That kind of love that I received from my mom was really the foundation of what allowed me to decide I could go hike by myself in the wilderness. And then, of course, there was, like you say, that very literal experience I had when I was, I grew up 20 miles from the nearest town, and the nearest town had just a population of 400 people in rural Aiken County, Minnesota, and in Beaver Township. I just looked up on the precinct, the primaries there. It was like 16 people voted in Beaver Township. I was like, yep, it's not changed at all. And I grew up on 40 acres of land. We built our house ourselves with trees we felled ourselves and stripped and treated. And we built a pole barn. The bottom level was where the horses' stalls were, and my stepfather's wood shop. He was a carpenter. And then on top of that was our house. And, we didn't have indoor plumbing. They got indoor plumbing when I was a sophomore in college. And I had to wash my hair. In the warm months, we would go to this pond a couple miles from our house, and that's where we would bathe. Or in the cold months, which were like 10 and a half of them, we would like heat water on the wood stove. And again, the wood stove that like my stepfather made himself out of a metal barrel. And, you know, everything was made by them. My mother grew food and canned it and preserved it. And I mean, it was extremely, my mom would always say, we're modern pioneers. And I hated it, you know. I would bitterly complain, like any teenager worth her salt. And I was like, I do not want this life. This is this mad, stupid, dumb hippie life, and I don't want it. Like, I want to go to the city and live like a cosmopolitan person would live. And my mother would say, well, you know, you can do what you want when you grow up, but you're going to thank me for this someday because it's character building. And I was always like, I don't want my character built, you know. And she was right. Yeah. So that's, you know, that I felt comfortable in the wilderness. So that was, then I was like, okay, yeah, I can go hike the Pacific Crest Trail. That's nothing.
I think that's what's so magical. And when I read your book, so I'll have to be honest, I didn't read your book like a mad through hiker who was like, oh, there's this great book on the Pacific Crest Trail, and it was getting all this fame. I actually read it after my wife read it. Mm-hmm. And I just don't read a lot of running books or hiking books sometimes. For some reason, I want to read other stuff. And when I read it, I was just blown away because it touched me so much, not because of the trail and the outdoor experience you had, but because of how you spoke about your mother, how you wrote about these experiences, and having a mother who was slowly slipping away. She battled with multiple sclerosis, and I saw that from a young age. There were so many similarities, and I think for somebody reading the book, yes, there's the journey of the Pacific Crest Trail, but how you wrote about your mother and your experiences. And since we are here at International Women's Day, I think, what do you think it is about that connection? Obviously, it's a strong connection that we have with our mothers and with women, but what do you think it is that makes it so magical in terms of how we are drawn to women and how they, I think, are probably the most powerful human beings on the planet in terms of what they do on a regular basis? Yeah. Even though they don't get the credit always.
We won't let them run the country, but we'll let them do everything else. So, at least so far. You know, I think that the power and influence of women on my life is, you know, everywhere I turn. And yes, it does start with my mom, you know, and I think that one of the things I wrote about a lot, you know, I just explained to you the ways that my mom's sort of spirit informed my ability to go hike the trail. But I think that deeper thing that my mom gave me was, you know, it has nothing to do with hiking or not hiking. It has to do with, you know, I think my theory is if you are loved well by the essential people in your life, your mother, your father, if you're loved well by them, that there's something that you have for the rest of your life that can never be taken away. It's almost like a kind of nutrition. It's like you didn't get the vitamin M or the vitamin F, you know, the mom and dad, the mother and father. And, you know, so many, you either did or you didn't get it, right? I got it from my mom, I didn't get it from my dad. That, you know, and that's a journey on its own, like trying to figure out how do I fill that hole that is left when you have a father who doesn't love you the way a father does. And one of the answers in my own, the way a father should, and one of the answers in my own life has been, my mother loved me so well that helped me learn how to fill that other hole. And of course, my mom died, you know, and there's another layer of loss. And I think that what, for me, has been really interesting when I think about the power of my mom in my life has been in those first years after she died, when I was grieving her, I felt so profoundly her absence. I felt so profoundly my sorrow over the fact that she would never be in my life again. And part of what happened on the Pacific Crest Trail, part of that was the journey itself, and part of it was that some time had passed. That I came to realize is that the power of my mom wasn't an absence in my life; it was a presence. And part of what was making me suffer so much is that I would be carrying my mother for the rest of my life, and I would be carrying her in a way that I didn't want to carry her. I wanted my mom just to be there. I didn't want to have to lug her along everywhere I went. And what hiking on the trail taught me is that I would have to do that, even though I wouldn't have chosen it, and that I could, and that could actually turn into something that wasn't about absence, that was about presence, that wasn't about loss, but was about gain. And, I think of that every day. I mean, my mother really is my hero still. After all these years, she's been dead longer than she was alive. And I think that she is more responsible for me being here before you today than anyone is. That she gave me what I needed to get myself here. And I think that's the most beautiful thing anyone who loves us can do. Yeah.
Definitely. And do you think, again, I know you're somebody who writes an advice column, but for men, women who maybe didn't get the vitamin F or the vitamin M and such, where do they get that? Are there those women in their lives out there, maybe haven't already been in their lives, but maybe there's somebody out there to do that? How does that happen?
Well, it's interesting because when I wrote, when I first started to write about my grief, which I've written about in all my books. My first book is a novel called Torch. Have any of you read Torch? All right. Couple people, good. Okay, it's about it's a novel, it's fiction, but it's about a woman who dies young of cancer and what her family does in the year after her death. Wild is about grief. Tiny Beautiful Things is threaded with loss, and when I first started writing about that experience, I thought, okay, the people who I'm really speaking probably the most deeply to are those who have lost a parent, or not just a parent, lost somebody. I always say somebody who was essential to them. It could be a child, it could be a sibling, it could be a lover, it could be, somebody who makes you feel like you really, really can't, like that they are essential to who you are, to your sense of well-being. And what I learned is that there's all kinds of different sorts of mother loss. That in so many ways, the dead mother people, as much as that is a sorrow, I think a deeper, more complicated sorrow is the people who have a mother who's not dead, but who never really did love them the way they were supposed to be loved. I have a father like that, so I relate to that. I understand what that kind of loss is, and it is complicated because there is something kind of simple about having a beloved dead mother, right? I don't know if your mom was complicated or not. Was she?
She had her complications at moments, but I feel like I didn't really get to know her because she lost so much early in her life, and so she wasn't the same mother, but she did have those glimmers, but
right.
She wasn't, she didn't stop from grabbing the wooden spoon when that sort of thing. So she had this love to her, but it was definitely just hard because she was going through this chronic disease and losing so much of her abilities at a young age when, you should be able to rear your children. You should be at the peak of your career and not being able to do things. So I think that was, I knew she loved me and I knew there were those moments and you cherish those times when she was able to do those things. But you also become a little bit frustrated as a child and an adolescent, and actually you get kicked off and you wish that you could have had, a mother who was different.
Right.
But I think you do cherish so much about what they did give you and what they did embody and pass along. So I feel like it is interesting. Like for me, I feel like she did, but
you still probably, and the question you asked is how do you reckon with that? Like if you had a parent who wasn't what you wish they would be, you have to come to terms with it in your life. You have to find that sense of belonging, that sense of love, that sense of unconditional acceptance from other sources, and ultimately I think from yourself too. That one of the things that I wrote about, I think that felt most important to me when I was writing Wild, was not a very familiar narrative that we see when it comes to these kind of like man versus nature, and I literally mean man versus nature. Is this kind of narrative that is about dominance and conquering and triumph. And what I really wanted to write about in Wild, because it felt truest to me about what that experience was, it was not about any of those things. It was about surrender. It was about acceptance. Those two things, which we, I think, so often see as passive. When you accept something, you accept things as they are. When you surrender to something, it's literally like this. You're saying, I will be part of what is, rather than I will dominate what is, or I will conquer what is. And so this sense of surrender and acceptance has been really key to me in not only accepting my mom's death, but accepting my father too and his shortcomings. And in some ways seeing my father not as a curse, but as a gift. I call him my dark teacher. My father taught me something really powerful about cruelty and violence and evil. And your mom, in being incapable because of her disease to essentially give to you what mothers should and usually do give their children, like, it wasn't a lesson you wanted to learn, but it was a lesson you learned. And then, like, what you get to do with that is, do you let that be something that's a burden in your life, or that's something that actually teaches you something that makes you stronger, better in every aspect, And so that's the long answer to, like, how you do that, how you heal that kind of deep wound, I think, is you do try to make it serve you.
Definitely.
And so hold you back.
Definitely. There's so much magic, like you said, in a journey like that, as well as looking back on your life and just how that comes back. I like to think that, does ultra running or running or doing these hard challenges in my life and chosen elective suffering, so to speak.
Right.
What it did, is that giving me, tools to live life better, or did my life give me the tools to do these things?
Yeah.
And how much, that goes back and forth.
What do you think it is? So, like, when you're saying ultra marathoning, like, how many miles are we talking about that you're running?
We don't have to go into details.
No, is it like 100 miles?
So 50,
like
100 miles or
yeah.
beyond. I've done.
And you just like go and you're going like, I'm going to go run 100 miles.
So
how long does it take you to run 100 miles?
Now she's interviewing me. So, the fastest I've done is 15 hours and 36 minutes. But being on the trail, like the Appalachian...
Wait a minute. So back up. So you run how long in 15 hours and 36 minutes?
100 miles on a trail. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so... But,
that's a long way.
But I feel like...
Was it a flat trail?
So it's mountainous trail, so not flat at all.
Oh, God. This is amazing.
But I feel like, those kinds of things I feel like there's so much back and forth. Like, we get so many elements, and it comes back forth. Like, our life prepares us to encounter things, whether it's life experiences or things we love to do, whether it's getting out in the outdoors. We're at an outdoor film festival, and people are coming here to gain inspiration and maybe get the courage to go and do something they didn't think they could do.
Yeah.
And, for me, yes, I've done all these crazy things, as you mentioned, but again, I still feel like it's really about that personal journey you have. Totally. And as much as, yes, doing the Appalachian Trail speed record, there was an element of, there's a lot of suffering, much like there was suffering you talked about being on the Pacific Crest Trail, maybe not having that backpacking background or that outdoor background. Although you were a Minnesota woods woman, so to speak, and very adverse our frontiers woman. But I feel like there is joy in that. So, I mean, we spoke earlier over tea that one of the biggest things I think is finding that. I think you're a lover of quotes, and so I'm not going to butcher the whole quote, but there's a quote that I love to reference, and it's, we often remember the misery with joy and fondness after we complete things, and I feel there is a reason to go out and do these things. So as one of my big questions, and Jenny, my wife, wanted to ask this too, because we grapple with this. We have two children now, 2 years old and 4 years old. How do we live here in Boulder, and anyone who lives in Boulder, Denver, or in any modern city now, how do we give our children, or how do we provide those skills? And we were speaking about mothering and National Women's Day. Like, how do we pass that on? Because we want to give them this best life. We want to not shelter them, but we give them so much. And are they getting these challenges, these life experiences that you or I got with having, say, a really tough childhood?
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like we should send them to the toughest school in town. And they should.
I know. Like, I know. I do. I worry about this.
Yeah. How do you grapple as being a mother of teenagers?
Well, and in every way too. With my kids now are 14 and 15. My son will be 16 in a month or so. So it's full on. I mean, my son is 6 feet tall. I mean, everyone's grown up and bratty and awful, and it's like they're teenagers. And I know you guys don't believe those little 2 and 4 year olds who are so like, Mama, Dada, like they love you. And my kids still love me deeply, but they just are less cuddly at this age, and maybe that's a good thing. But so first, I want to say just yes to this whole business that you were talking about the difficulty and the suffering is very often like a really big part of the best things that we do. I call it retrospective fun, and so much of hiking is retrospective fun. I mean, obviously there are moments where you're walking along, you're like, this is amazing, and I'm just so happy to be here. But there are times where you're like, okay, this is hard and this is hurting, or it's hot or it's cold or it's raining or whatever it is. And, somehow the mountaintop is an hour further than you thought it would be, or the parking lot is, right? It's just, but you looking back, you're always like, that was amazing and that was fun. And I think that parenting can be that way too.
A lot.
I was just talking to my kids about this actually just 2 days ago, because several times what my husband and I have done with our kids is we travel. We go on big extended trips with them. Like 3 different times now we've done a kind of around the world trip. And we started, the first time we did it was in 2012, right after Wild came out. So gosh, how old were the kids then? I can't do the math, but they were young. And what? 8 and 6. So we went to Australia, we went to Laos, we went to Thailand, we went to Japan. Everywhere we go, we always hiked with our kids and made them hike, at the beginning. And, we would say to them, we would try to, convince them, like, this is going to be fun, and this is going to, we would give them gummy bears and reward them with terrible sugary things, and, all of that. And what I can say is that, it's kind of like with anything, like, if you just stick with it, like, it's like, this is our value system. This is what our family does. This is what we find to be useful or meaningful. And just over and over, get them in these places, get them, out of their comfort zones, exploring, like my kids can be like, yeah, when they were 6 and 8, they went trekking on this long trek, this wild trek in Laos. I mean, who's done that, And I would say to them, like, you guys, this is an extraordinary experience, even though you're tired and your back hurts or whatever you're saying is, not fun. And what I was going to say is just the other day, my son was like, those memories of those travels and those hikes are the best memories I have, he says to me. And what's funny about it is in the snapshot, in the moment that it was happening, like somebody's having a tantrum and somebody's fighting and, all of this stuff, but they remember, they experience it like we do. It's retrospective fun. And it does become something meaningful. So I would just say stick with it. It's kind of like keep putting the broccoli on their plate. The 300th time they're going to eat it. Keep bringing them out, keep, asking them to go into the world and to take risks. My kids now own all of that. Like, they themselves love to go hiking and canoeing and climbing and, like, all of the things that we've exposed them to. They now are old enough that they're like, no, this is what we're going to do. My son lately has been going out with his friends. They go hiking in Forest Park in Portland. There's this wonderful park right in the city. And he'll be just like, we're going to go on a hike. Now, they might also be tripping on shrooms. But, I'm like, wait, you're going on a hike? With 5 of your friends? What are you guys going to do? We're just going to go hike. I'm like, I don't know. It sounds kind of fishy to me. Why would you want to go on a hike?
Exactly. So stick with it. It's great advice.
Stick with it and check their pockets.
It sounds like maybe writing. I have a lot of writer friends who are actually, I like to say, real writers. Writing kind of got thrown into my lap, and my wife gives me a hard time, like, oh, you're a writer. And I'm like, yeah, but I didn't study to do this. This is something I love to share myself in stories and inspire others and get the messages out. But at the same time, it's a very hard process.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. The more writers I speak to, and really good ones, it's like their profession, I'm always like, oh gosh, how do you like enjoy this process? Like,
right.
It's just like, the more I talk to writers, the more I realize, like, writers actually hate the
writing.
actual writing.
Yeah.
But you seem to maybe like it, because I'm like, yeah. So what would you say to that, to those out there who are writers or filmmakers or artists? Like, what do you enjoy that process?
But it's writing to me is extremely much like an ultra marathoning. Not that I've ever run an ultra marathon, but or anything, any physical thing that's like difficult. Like, in the moment, it's very uncomfortable, punctuated by stretches of time where you're like, high. It's like total bliss. And you're like, how did I get this lucky? And then it's uncomfortable and miserable and difficult, and you think you can't go on. Like, that's how writing feels to me. And that's how writing feels to every writer I know, honestly. And the ones that don't feel that way, we don't want to hear from them. I mean, Because it's hard. You know, what you're doing when you're writing is you're making something out of nothing. You know, you're sitting there and you're deciding that these ideas in your head are worth writing on a computer screen or on paper. And then your job is to actually like create a kind of thing, a story, if you will, that other people will want to read and absorb. And that's like really hard work. To make something out of nothing is very difficult work. That's what creation is. And so, I mean, I just think to give yourself over to that fact has been one of the most, I guess, helpful things to me, motivating things, if you will. Because it's not about, you know, we say this all the time, but it's really true. It's not about sitting around saying, you know, when will I feel inspired to write? Which is another way of saying, when will it be like really easy to just sit down and be like, you know? And that happens every now and then, but usually it doesn't. And you just have to sit down and do the work or stand up. I have a standing desk. Let's stand up and do it. You know, that you just give yourself over to the difficulty of it the same way you give yourself. It's not easy to run a 100 miles. It's not easy to go on a 5-mile hike up a mountain, you know. And I think too that, you know, this is another, you know, way, sort of a method, like how do I get around that? Is you just do it one step at a, you know, one page at a time, one step at a time, one 15-minute block at a time, 1 hour at a time. Those things, that's how, I mean, when you're running and it's difficult for you, how do you keep going? What do you do actually? Do you break it up into segments? Do you, I mean,
you definitely have to think, if you can't think I have 50 more miles
Yeah.
today, or I have, you know,
You go,
another
I'm just going to go
20
another,
some miles.
you know,
And it's
yeah.
bit by bit. And I guess it's just maybe the wiring that's different too. To sit in front of a computer for me
Yeah.
was just agonizing. I'd come back, and Jenny, my wife and I wrote our second book together,
Right.
which is probably a mistake, having somebody else, a partner, looking over, but it was difficult in the fact that I'd come back and she'd be like, what, you got 2 pages done? You were
Right.
gone for 4 hours or like 6 hours. She's home with a 1-year-old
And she's
pregnant and she's got her pages to write. Like, and I think that, you know, having a deadline looming for me, like obviously a deadline on the Appalachian Trail, having a record looming out there, having something to push me extra. But it is always fascinating when writers tell me like, oh, I just chip away at it. And for me, it was just grueling to sit in front of a screen or, like you said, make something out of nothing. And I just assume when you read this finished work, like a book like Wild, I was reading a couple passages last night, and I'm just like, how did she come up with, you described your mother grabbing your pant leg and the fabric with a proprietarily, and I was like, how did she come up with that adjective? You know, like, to describe it, I was like, it was brilliant, and like, how does that happen? And that's where, again, it doesn't happen just, you know, in one swoop of the pen or in one keystroke.
And yeah, I mean, that's the other piece of it, is it's like you know, it's years of apprenticing yourself to the craft. I mean, you don't think of yourself as a writer foremost. I do. You know, like I didn't write Wild because I took a hike on the Pacific Crest Trail. I wrote Wild because I'm a writer. Do you see what I mean? Like, I think, you know, some people have done, like, you know, a really big adventure, like, I don't know, like been the person who ran the AT the fastest that anyone has ever run it, you know? And then it's like, write a book about that, because that experience in itself is a singular thing. But, you know, then there's the hundreds of people who hiked the whole AT that year. And some of them could write a beautiful, brilliant book about that experience. And then the other, you know, all of the rest of them would write a boring, tedious, horrible book about that experience. You know, that it's not the experience that is the driver of the book. Sure. It's the consciousness behind it. It's the craft. It's the person who spent years thinking about, like, how to describe the way her mother reaches out and touches her pants, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the piece of it for me that was always the most... I mean, that's why I wrote Wild. You know, I wasn't like, everyone needs to hear about my, you know, 94 days on the trail.
Sure.
It was more that I wanted to tell a story about how that, you know, how journey changes us, in my case, but also all of us. You know, people relate to that book because they're like, that, you know, I did something like this too, even though I never put on the Pacific Crest Trail. I had some kind of journey of transformation too.
No, totally.
Yeah.
And since we're talking on that topic, with your first book being fiction and a novel, and I know you wove some of your experiences.
Yeah. It's set in northern Minnesota, you sure?
Yeah, I do need to read that. I was going to try and tick that off in a few days after I heard you was doing this. But at the same time, you know, you waited to do your memoir, and I'm not like picking apart your decisions on this, but what made you decide to finally delve into memoir and delve into your own life? Because it's very hard to write about yourself. It's very hard to expose yourself, and for a lot of people, it's very painful and as well as cathartic to go through that process. But what made you finally write a memoir instead of just write fictional novels and take your knowledge behind that?
Yeah, so, I really always thought of myself as a fiction writer foremost, and I trained as, I have my MFA in fiction writing, and most of the books that have been the most meaningful to me in terms of teaching me how to be a writer are novels and short stories. But what happened is, so I finished my first book, Torch, and when I sold it, I was pregnant with my first child, and by the time it was published, I had 2 kids under the age of 2. My kids are just 17 months apart. And I was just like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to write another book? I have these kids. It took me forever to write Torch. And so I started to think about, I started writing essays and publishing them in magazines. And I thought, maybe I can put together a collection of essays. And they kind of told the story of my 20s. And the piece that was missing, I'd never written about my hike on the Pacific Crest Trail. So I thought, do I have like about 15 or 20 pages worth of material, And I was like, I think so. So I started writing this essay that was what was going to be my hike on the Pacific Crest Trail. And I'm going, and then it's like 20 pages, 30 pages, 40 pages, and I haven't even set foot on the trail yet, And I realized that, I've got to, that there's all this stuff here. But then I thought, like, who wants to hear about my little hike? I didn't hike the whole trail. I didn't hike the trail the fastest, the best. There was nothing exceptional, actually, about my hike on the trail. So what happened is I wrote the scene that I'm the morning of that I'm beginning my hike. I'm in this motel room in the town of Mojave, California, and I have just opened up all these, I'm opening up all these containers of things that I've purchased to go backpacking with, because I had never packed my backpack. I'd never gone backpacking. I'd never put all the shit in my backpack. I'd never lifted my backpack. And when I found that I was all packed, and also, you'll understand this because, I just thought the Mojave Desert sounds like a cool place to begin. And being from the land of 10,000 lakes, I'm like, there's just water everywhere, right? And I'm like, the thing about the Mojave Desert is there's not any water, So I had to carry like many pounds of water in this dromedary bag. So I had to strap that to my pack too. And I couldn't lift my pack. And I really couldn't lift my pack. It was really so heavy that it was beyond any kind of ability I had to lift it. So, but the conundrum is that the one thing I had to do, lift my pack, was the one thing I could not do, lift my pack. It's the same thing. What I had to do, what I could not do. And when I wrote that scene, and even just now saying it to you, like I just got chills because I was like, this is what the book is about. The book isn't about like, I'm so interesting because I took a hike, or I suffered more than anyone else because I loved my mother and she died. Those are very ordinary experiences, actually, that I share with a lot of people. What was really the powerful truth, the powerful driver to me behind that book was, what do we do when we have to do the thing that we cannot do? And what it became about to me also was all of you, because everyone in this room has had to do something you thought you couldn't do. And if you haven't yet, that's coming. It is. We have to learn how to bear the unbearable. And that's what my hike on the Pacific Crest Trail did. That's what that moment of truth in that motel room did. And what I love about that is, I always was looking for that universal thread. That is the reason to write a memoir. When you have lived an experience that you understand to be part of the human story, that brings us all the way back to the ancients. The things that you have done, these extreme things you've done, and let's just say they have been extreme. I will say, most people aren't going to do that extreme thing, but most people will be brought to the end of what they think is possible. And it's probably going to be a smaller thing, a humbler thing, not a thing that anyone else around them will notice, but it's the thing that they're grappling with. And that's the truth you write to when you hike 100, when you do whatever it is some extraordinary thing that you're going to write about. And so that's what taught me that, okay, Wild's a book, actually. And so I just wrote that book with that question in mind: how do we bear what we cannot bear? And because, of course, it was literal with the backpack, it was also what I had to figure out. I had to figure that out in my life about my mom and about just like my life. I had to come to understand that and learn how to do it. And you know, hiking's such a great teacher because it's just about putting one foot in front of the other. One of my favorite, and I love too the ways that people have talked to us. I'm sure you get this too. People come to you and say, okay, I didn't do what you did, but this inspired me to do that, or this is what I lived through. One of my favorite emails that I get from people, and I've now received dozens in this category, and that is people who just said, you know, I was always afraid to go for a walk alone, like a walk just like outside my door and just around my town. I was always afraid to go for a walk alone. And you gave me courage, and I worked up the courage and did it. And I think that is every much of an accomplishment as somebody who then went and, you know, summited Mount Everest or whatever because they were inspired by my book. You know, that it's not, right? It's not like who did the best thing. It's you against yourself always, right?
And I think it's that entry point, too. It was fascinating. My wife and I, so I had you to thank to get my wife out to do some hiking. She was a climber, and always thought hiking was dorky or like something that
those
she's
like weaklings.
And it's not like she's a professional climber, but she's like, why would people put on a backpack carrying like even a lot of my runner friends are just like, why would you carry all that weight? It just sounds drudgery. But I love the fact that you did allow people, no matter what level they were at, they thought, I could go and do this. Yeah. And so Jenny and I, she got inspired because I mentioned she read your book first. And
thank you, Jenny.
And she was the one who said, I actually, let's go on the Pacific Crest Trail. She knew it was something that I was really fond for, and I spent a lot of time on the PCT, but we really saw the effect of what your book had done in 2013. We made our way to the Mexican border. We wanted to do a section, and our goal is every year we'll try and dedicate a week, 2 weeks to just going out and doing piece by piece. We're not going to do the whole thing. And we did it by ourselves. And on the bus ride down, we did it old school style, stay in the hotel, catch a train, catch a bus, literally wear all our clothes on the plane that we were going to use on the trail. We didn't want to leave anything there. And we're riding the bus, and there was and it's a great story, I think, because it is International Women's Day, but there was a mother and a daughter from Ohio, the Midwest, had never been on the trail before. They just decided after reading your book, they were going to go and hike the Pacific Crest Trail. Yeah. And I know, a lot has been said about, the wild effect and such, but to me it was just really eye-opening to see the effect it had. And I think it is giving people that license or that just little message to be like, yes, you could do this. It doesn't matter where you come from or what you've done in the past. And I think, especially for women, to give them this feeling like I could do this on my own. Because when you did it, there were probably a handful of women who had even hiked the whole trail in its entirety. And what you did. So I thought that was mind-blowing when we met. Like, they weren't going to maybe stay together the whole way, but they were going to start together. And
that's
they were
so
starting
wonderful.
the Pacific Crest Trail. And I think, we have all of us in the audience who have decided to do something, whether it's the PCT or something else in their lives. And it's just the effect like that. So I wanted to thank you, but also what has it been like, and what do you think is important for maybe a woman out there who's going to go out on her own, or what gives them that extra little push that they might?
Well, people, especially when the movie, it was like right after it came out in the movie, and people were always like, at my Q&As and stuff, are you worried that you've caused all these people to, and I'm like, go hiking? Yeah, it's so terrible. It's a terrible thing. I've driven them into the wilderness, and they're walking.
Through hikers can be a little like, there's a lot of old school, like, they just like, it's too crowded now.
No, there's no, like, the funny thing that happened as well, that it showed me something about human nature that was kind of sad and hard, is there's no like category of people. If you're going to hate wild, the category you're probably going to be in is, uptight, snobbish, elitist backpacker person who thinks that the wilderness belongs to him or her. It's a very small portion of the population, but really, like that is, it was like, I thought that they were my people, and they were like, you're not my people. Because I didn't have a license, apparently, buy a backpack and go into the, But what I love that I did, so I'm like, okay, I'm not talking to you. If I mean, like you're not my audience then. What I also want to say to those people is like, well, how did you learn how to backpack? You probably did what I did. You brought too much stuff on the trail, and then you learned like not to bring so much stuff. And how did you learn how to get the right boots? You probably had the wrong boots. I think
read a book or an article.
that's right. Like there's such a lack of humility in any kind of snobbery like that, But what I love is, that's just a tiny little portion of the readers, of course. But I think that more importantly, like I love what I did for women and men too, just to say like, listen, like you don't have to look a certain way. You don't have to have a certain kind of body. You don't have to have a certain kind of background. You don't have to have a certain kind of education in order to make a go of it on a trail, on a wilderness trail. Like you get to go out there and see how it feels to walk. And you also get to go out there and see how it feels to walk alone. And if you were a woman who, like all women throughout time, have been told, don't go alone. It's dangerous to go alone. Women are allowed to go alone. When you're putting yourself at risk. If something bad happens to you and you're a woman who goes alone, it's kind of your fault because you disobeyed the rules. And what I said by doing it and by writing about it is, no, I don't believe that. Like we can tell ourselves a different story. And we have to tell ourselves a different story about fear if we're ever going to do anything alone in the wilderness. You absolutely have to tell yourself the story that I am capable, I am strong, I can do this, right? To reject the messages that are all saying, you can't, you won't, you shouldn't. And so, I think that is probably the most, I love, like if my legacy is that more people decided to go on a walk by themselves, I just think, thank you. Oops, sorry, microphone. I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that. And I don't think, I think that the best way that we come to wisdom and knowledge is by doing. And we never forget a lesson we learned the hard way. I did not begin the trail as an expert backpacker, but I ended it as one. I'm a fucking really good backpacker now. Like I know how to do it. I know how to do it, right? Right?
Oh yeah, no, it's you have to learn, right?
Yeah, and you never forget it because it's like, and this goes back to the kids too. Like, I think anyone in our generation or anyone basically over a certain age grew up in the generation of like go outside and play, parenting, right? Yeah. Was it always just like do whatever, go, just don't come home until dinner, and that is the piece with our kids. Like I try to be like, listen, you little cupcakes, go out there and find hard things, that aren't psychedelic mushrooms, and I think that that's like a really important piece of parenting is that kind of letting go and letting your kids do.
Yeah, and the world isn't so scary.
Yeah, because they learn. Yeah, but it's hard to do that.
Definitely.
Especially when they're 2 and 4, because they're still at this age where you're like, oh baby, and so maybe don't let them go out just yet.
Yeah. And then in regards to the trail itself, I think one of the most magical. Who's actually through hiked, section hiked, been on the trail say for a couple weeks at a time? How about in the audience? Let's see.
Oh, awesome.
A bunch of you, but not too many. That's awesome. So I hope they get. One of the things I think that's so great. We talk about being alone on the trail, but the community. And even back in the day when you did, there were so few people doing the Pacific Crest Trail, but those who have spent time, say, on the Appalachian Trail or more popular trails, the fabric of the individuals. You write about some of these individuals, whether you met them for a few hours or you met them for days and hiked with them, or they were somebody who gave you a ride. What do you think it is about the long trails, the national scenic trails, or just trails in general that give people this sense of belonging and just being able to interact? Because we can be such, especially growing up in Minnesota, we can be these like basically introverted, like don't talk to me, I'll say hi nice, but I don't really want to be nice. I'm going to do my thing. And I think people who spend time on the trail can get in their own heads a lot. Like, what do you think it is about the community that makes it so special? It's really one of my favorite things about any kind of long distance hiking, that there's a sense, I think what it is this sense of like, we're in this together. And that you're out there, you're all doing the same thing. This is true. I'm sure. I've actually run a couple of races myself. Had a cross country. But I was a cross country, But it's running is that way too. There's this sense of like we're all doing this,
in every body that is propelling itself over this distance or this trail or this, in these conditions, and here we are together. There's this wonderful sense of like, it doesn't matter what other differences we might have. We have this big thing in common. And what's cool about that too is it's all about the here and now. Like right now, it's 103 degrees and it's scorching hot and we're all dying out here, but here we are together, or it's freezing or it's whatever it is. And we're all enduring this same difficulty. And you immediately have a sense of kinship, of trust, and of a bond that I find to be incredibly moving and powerful. And it does remind me a little bit, growing up in northern Minnesota, I remember, I really did I've lived in Beaver Township, and it was like, our nearest neighbor was like, a mile away, and it would be a blizzard or something, and my stepdad had a tractor with a plow on the front, and he would go and he would drive up and down the road and plow out everyone's driveway. And the people, the nearest neighbors who lived a mile away had nothing in common with us. They were the most extreme opposite of, they were like religious fundamentalists. They were, they had completely different beliefs about the world and life than we did. But there was this, we're always going to plow your driveway. And when my mom was sick, they every day bringing us dishes of food, those people, and I love that kind of sense of like, none of the rest of this matters. Here we are, we're in this together. It's really powerful and beautiful.
Humans are, I don't know, there's still something intrinsic us. Like, we are good people.
Yeah, we are good people.
You go to these small rural towns, and like you said, background-wise, completely different, but they somehow, some people hate the hikers that come through town and call them, hiker trash and things like that, but there's also this sense that the locals really love the hikers.
Yeah,
they love talking to them and sharing their story, and I think that's a hard thing to come by these days. People don't want to talk to strangers or people that don't look or talk like them or have the same beliefs. And I think the trail breaks down not only on the trail with the people you hike with, but also off the trail in the communities.
For sure. And when I hiked the trail, there were just so few hikers that very often, which I always found surprising, like I would meet people in the community that I was hiking through, and they wouldn't even know. I would tell them, this is the Pacific Crest Trail. They'd be like, what in Sam hell are you doing? And they were so nice to me because they were so afraid. They were so startled by me because they were so afraid for me, And they would be like, well, you have a gun, don't you? And I'd be like, no. And, they were alarmed that I was, and so but they're very welcoming and warm. And, to this day, like those of you who might remember Greg I wrote about in Wild, he's the first hiker I encountered. He was this man who was like, knew how to backpack and he's like, I just seeing him, I realized, I'm really stupid. And he's like, no, you're doing great. You're green, but you're doing it. So it turns out he, because I was hiking the trail before really anyone was on the internet, it wasn't like we all then like went and friended each other on Facebook and exchanged email addresses. We exchanged addresses and some of us stayed in touch a little bit, but then, we went our ways. And so Wild came out and it had been out maybe like 2 or 3 days. And I get this, and I tried to look for people when I was doing the book, but I couldn't find, his real name is Roger Carpenter. And his name was common enough that I Googled it and I couldn't find any Roger Carpenters. But Wild had been out a couple days, and I get this email from him, and he's like, Cheryl, it's Roger, and I just read your book. And he's like, and I'm like, I called you Greg in the book because I didn't want to, he knew I called him Greg in the book when he read the book, but unless I asked somebody, like, can I use your real name? I just gave him a different name. But so the funniest thing now, Roger, he's like, he's got like a business card. He's like, hey, my name is Roger Carpenter. I'm Greg in Wild. It's like, and he just turned 60 last week, and he's like, his birthday cake said like Greg in Wild. Like he's always like Greg in Wild, Greg in Wild, Greg in Wild. He like came to the LA premiere of the movie Wild. I got him an invitation. He's like so proud to be, and he's like hiked now the Continental Divide Trail, the AT, like he's like this total like hiker dude still, but it's still, some of those bonds are just like such a lovely, beautiful, sweet thing.
Definitely. And since we are at an outdoor film festival, and for people we mentioned earlier, like you said, you want people, like we should have more people out walking or hiking or doing these things. And I think that's what film festivals are here to do, is to get people to feel like, hey, I could go and do maybe not that, but I could do this. And in the way of like, personally feel it's so important, like as much as the trails get more crowded or as much as our favorite places get more and more crowded, do you feel, as far as like what kind of things do you ever wonder about, like what the book has done and where you want it to go, and would you write another Wild about something else and be like, as long as I've given people that encouragement to do something?
Right. Yeah. The sequel is called Mild. Marriage, motherhood, monogamy. Okay, so no, I do think I will. I'm working on another book right now, and it does absolutely have. I mean, that Somewhere on the Pacific Crest Trail is just one of the many adventures I've had, and I think I'll continue to write about journey in this next book. I also write about some things along those lines, and I've always been. I think one of the things that happened when I was writing Wild, obviously, I had to keep that book focused on like that expedition and that experience of that emotional journey and then that physical journey. But yeah, I've always been somebody who wanted to step into the world and find what it would tell me about myself and what it would tell me about us. And so, I think of that is just like, that will be something that all throughout my life, like I said, we've taken our kids out of school, we go journeying, because I do think, like, I love to do stuff. I also love the way it deepens our sense of who we are. And so that's always going to be the kind of rich material, the rich fodder for my books.
That's great. Yeah. So travel, you're not slowing
down.
Travel,
not even kind of slowing down, no. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great to hear.
So yeah. I mean, now, but one thing I wanted to say, the crowded trails. One thing I have found, like, obviously there are certain trails that are really crowded, but my experience still overall in the wilderness is once you get, like, 10 feet outside the parking or whatever, like, everyone's given up and turned back for the car. I mean, like, you're out there by yourself. I mean, you can be alone on a hiking trail in America pretty damn easily, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. And I feel like the more people we can get out there, the more they're going to have a strong desire to protect them or be interested in.
I'm with that.
And so
also
I feel like as much as we don't want them overcrowded, we need people out there.
You protect what you love. Yeah. And also it gives the cougars somebody else to eat.
That's true. So it evens out the playing field a little bit. That's great.
Though I will say, speaking of being eaten by things, I went hiking, my family and I went and hiked a couple of the long trails in New Zealand. They have this amazing trail system, the Great Walks of New Zealand. And we did the Rootburn and the Milford. Have any of you been on those trails? Just so beautiful. And one of the things that I didn't know until we were in New Zealand, and my kids were extremely happy about this too, is that absolutely nothing in New Zealand can possibly harm you. Nothing will bite you. Nothing will. They don't have any poisonous snakes. They don't have any big bears or cougars or anything like that. So you're totally safe. I mean, there might be like there was like a sort of pigeon-like bird that startled me once, but like everything else. So you're just, if that's your phobia about going into the wilderness, go to New Zealand and hike.
You'll be safe.
Yeah.
Well,
good to know, right?
Yeah. Excellent. Well, lastly, is there any bit of advice, like after, what has it been now? Almost 9 years since Wild has come out, right?
8 years.
I guess,
it came out March 20th of 2012.
So we're coming up, okay.
Yeah,
so
the 8-year
very close
anniversary.
to the anniversary. Is there anything, and we'll leave it on the note of International Women's Day, like is there anything else you'd say for the women out there in the audience, or those that maybe you haven't said in Wild, like what's like your bit of advice? And I know you give a lot of advice, so maybe you're burnt out on that.
This is good. I think, one of those things that I kind of...
And I don't mean hiking advice, I mean
life
advice. Yeah.
Okay. One of the things I've returned to a couple times just in our discussion is like this idea of really not living your life by the received narrative. And there's a really heavily scripted narrative that men and boys receive and that girls and women receive. And everything good that I've done, everything that has made me feel like the whole person that I am, or made me feel that I've grown or evolved, had to do with really rewriting that script. Like saying, I'm not going to live my life by the sort of mandates that were put upon me as a girl. That I'm going to say, I am strong enough, I am capable enough, I can do this, I'm not afraid. And I think that kind of liberation is something that starts like really deep within. And one of the cool things about it is the more that you do the things that like you want to do, like I want to go hike the Pacific Crest Trail by myself, and I'm going to do it, even though some people would say I shouldn't or can't or won't. I'm going to do it. The more you do that stuff, then the thing itself becomes your teacher. One of the things I knew right away when I finished my hike is that it would never leave me. That sense of my own capacity and strength and resilience and capability and courage would never leave me. Now, that doesn't mean I wouldn't sometimes feel weak or stupid or afraid but that sense of I have done this before, I have done something like this before that was really the deeply right thing to do, that it stays with you. And so, you letting your body be the teacher, guiding your body into the things that will teach you about your strength and your courage rather than your weakness and your fear. It's a really powerful thing to do, whether you're a man or a woman.
Yeah, and I didn't mean just for women. I know there's men in the audience,
Yeah.
and we could all learn from it, but
Yeah.
thank you. That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your words and your advice to everyone. We appreciate it, and we're glad to hear you're out there hiking still and exploring. Keep exploring. Take
Thank
time
you.
to do that.
We're glad to hear somebody's got to run 100 miles in 15 hours.
You're doing great. But thank you so much for
Scott.
joining
This
us
was so
today.
fun.
Thank you. Cheryl Strayed, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. That was so fun.
Thank you.
You're wonderful. Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Are you
Oh,
for a
sure,
couple
yeah.
minutes? So I'm sorry. Those of you that want to stick, I know I was staying on schedule, but I didn't know we had a couple minutes. If we'll try to do this really quick.
Who has
and
questions?
so if you have a question, and here's how I'd like you to do it. Please do it in Twitter length. So don't tell us your life story. I'm sorry, we have since we can get through more questions. I know Cheryl would love to hear it, but keep it to 160 characters, and Cheryl will answer away. Go ahead.
Oh, awesome. The
So
band
the
First
question
Aid
was,
Kit.
thank you for introducing First Aid Kit to this.
Yes, First Aid